I'm so glad 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 of being remembered. Why don't you say to me? Say time and time again. I feel God. I get that. Looking straight for me. Why should I?
Okay, hi everyone. We are now actually recording. Welcome to this is session 5 of the Race Exchange. A smaller group than we were expecting, but it should be a nice little chat nonetheless. And the topic for today is kind of racism versus classism. It's not really a versus. It's kind of just like how do these two things, these two really core aspects of our identity, interlink and share a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences. I think it's important that everyone feels that they can talk about it because, you know, we are often faced with situations where people might think that we're a certain way because of our background and our class, and exactly the same things happen to people in terms of racism. So it's a really interesting discussion, I hope. So before we go into it, if everyone can just introduce who they are, and I'll go with who is first on my screen. So I know it says Tommy, but it's actually Christina. If you could just, here you are, you are here.
The name lies. I'm Christina. My partner is called Tommy. I live in Glasgow, but I'm from Newcastle, and I'm here, I guess, for the same reason everybody is, because it's important to talk about these things. And from my experience as well, like I'm from the northeast of England, which at the moment there is some not very nice stuff happening there in terms of how this is being dealt with, especially in terms of a race versus and or class kind of situation. And especially where I'm from, I feel like in the negative sense there are a lot of people who compare the two as if they are the same when they're not. And I have an interest in that as my background. It's not something that I feel like guilty or responsible for, but it's strange to be from an area where you're seeing a lot of that, and how I see that playing out. It's definitely an important conversation to have. So yeah, I'm here to participate in it and share my experiences with it, I guess.
Thank you, Christina. Josie.
Hiya, I'm Josie. I'm living in Manchester at the moment, but from Sheffield originally. I'm 31, cisgendered, white, female, and I grew up very working class, but now I think I'm classed as like the technical middle class. I've been trying to learn more about, because I think class is quite different now anyway to what it was like during like the 70s and 80s when a lot of stuff was kicking off. So yeah, I've just been trying to learn about that, and I'm here really because mostly to learn and to listen, but also like I just want to help and keep momentum going with my own work that I'm trying to do in helping the movement. So yeah.
Thank you, Josie. Joel, next please.
Hi, my name's Joel. I live in Manchester at the moment. I'm also from a working class colour background in Nottingham. I'm a white 33-year-old man. I do think there's kind of like a lot of conversation around class and racism, and there's a lot of kind of shared battles there. There's also a lot of differences. So like the other people in this conversation today, I just like want to, delve into that more and discuss it more, and maybe think about how we can use the empathy from our own kind of background and position to actually understand racism and maybe reach out and help in that way.
That's great. Thank you, Joel. And then Lily, last but not least.
So, I'm Lily. I feel like a baby now. I'm only 9. I'm 20.
Thank you for joining the session. That's even more important.
So I'm from Macclesfield, but I study music in Manchester at the moment. I've been quite nervous about participating in these talks so far because I feel like, obviously I'm white, and I feel like I come from a very privileged background, and I feel like often people like me, we feel very worried about participating in these conversations in case, you know, saying the wrong thing or being insensitive without meaning to. I also obviously feel that we need to keep the momentum going, as Josie said, and we need to like keep doing the stuff. And yeah, this is something that really interests me because in music, I think especially, I did classical music, and I think obviously diversity in terms of race and class is a massive issue in classical music. It's predominantly upper class white people, so it's something that obviously really needs to be addressed very much, and yeah, I'd be interested to discuss that with you all, so that's why I'm here.
That's great, thank you very much, everyone. So everyone's sharing from like a slightly different kind of, or I don't know, kind of standpoint or background. There were meant to be a few other people kind of different backgrounds and heritages today, but they apologise, and I completely accepted their apologies, and I think they've probably just been having these discussions a lot themselves. So I'm kind of speaking from a different point from you guys, because my story that I'm going to share is going to kind of bring to the fore this whole like what class I am, even though I am a certain race, you know. So I'm going to start, and I've written some notes down and stuff, so to make sure I don't kind of just go off on one, and be prepared. So when I kind of come up with some of these topics, I start like writing a little bit of a rant about what first comes to my mind. And the first point of call on this topic for me was like, obviously it's a provocative title, we're not trying to put anyone against each other at all. It was actually more just kind of for the, you know, just for the title of it, as opposed to actually being how we're going to discuss it. But you can be born into a class. So like the first thing you can be born into a class, but you can effectively, even though it's still difficult, move out of your class. Whereas obviously you're born a different skin colour, and you can't change that. Essentially, you can change aspects of your identity. Actually, you can change your class, whatever class you believe you are. It can go up and down as well, obviously. Not everyone is aspiring to be middle class, you know, but I think that tends to be a very common narrative for a lot of people. And kind of raises this permanent fixture and feature. It's more visible, arguably more visible. Again, like that's something for its own debate. Maybe we can come back to whether like you kind of wear your class on your sleeve or not, whether you hide your class, whether you could try and be another class. Maybe you try and be more working class than you are middle class. You know, there are these aspects of things that I'd be interested to hear what people think on that. So I guess the biggest difficulty is just that obviously the government oppresses both working class people and people of different colours, and that is a very obvious thing that's happening, and we're trying to push through that, however long it takes. You know, I feel like this is definitely a turning point for people calling things out a little bit more than they have been so far in their lives to date. If you're a successful Black person, it's interesting because obviously there's the whole trope of like, well, you come here and you're taking our jobs kind of thing. So you almost can't really ascend without getting some judgment for how did you get there? What have you done to get there? Have you had to sacrifice some aspects of your identity to get there? Arguably, I would say from my experience, yes, 100%. You know, and it's strange because you have things like, I think I've told this story in one of the sessions before, but like I had moments only 3 or 4 years ago when I was applying for jobs where I genuinely wanted to send my CV with a different name on top just to see if I'd be getting a better, because I was like, my CV is really strong. Like, I didn't do it because I actually think I was quite worried about the reality. If it actually came back and that was the case, I think that would have shook me up quite a lot. But it's a strange one, isn't it, to think that like because of that, I don't know, because of your name, there might be a slight difference in the way you're treated, even though I actually, in my personal experience, I don't identify with middle class or working class, and I'll come back to that a little bit in a sec. So I like to call myself migrant class. I don't think it's a tick box yet. I don't know if it exists. I don't know if other people would feel comfortable with that, but that's what I like to think. Because I've come from migrants, so we've worked our way up from this migrant status that has been inherently, we've had to experience certain levels of racism probably, you know, during our life but migrant class, I think, because it's not necessarily that my family were in poverty where they were, but obviously compared to a lifestyle in England, it was, you immediately move up class by moving here. It's quite interesting. But then there is still that worry of being seen as stealing from the local people, and I see where that comes up. I don't agree with it, and I think there are ways that we can try and kind of get rid of that through understanding more. But it is, I can see why it is thought that way. And then you yourself, actually, as a Black person who might have then gone to uni and do things that certain people that maybe I went to school with, especially in South East London, very working class area, didn't necessarily move on to do. And you're like, well, do I deserve this? Have I had an upper hand somehow? And then you think, how have I had an upper hand? Because actually I've had a lot of racism towards me. So it's kind of like, it's so difficult to navigate. When we moved into the suburbs from London, my family, we actually found ourselves in very middle class areas. And I remember, like, I'm getting 12, 13, I'm kind of understanding the world a little bit. And I would be in my house, overhear the conversations my parents were having, knew that our house was rented, that our cars were rented, all these things, and then go out into the world with this kind of like, well, people must think that we have money, but we don't. And you so strange, I don't know, it's not fraudulent, but do you know what I mean? You're like, my parents are trying to pretend that they're middle class to fit in, they're really not. And I'm having to uphold that within in school and things like that. But I do believe that once I did leave home and stuff, I came into my own. I don't think, for me, I don't know, class wasn't necessarily something that I felt held me back. But it just meant that I didn't really understand it. I didn't have the working class. Working classness is whiteness, right? At the end of the day, I feel like I can't really talk about working classness, if I'm very honest, but I do end up in more situations with working class people than I do with middle class people. I had exposure to middle class life. I had friends, maybe I got on with a lot of friends who actually were quite like middle class, and go to their houses and they'd have these massive drives and chairs, cars in the driveways and things. I'm like, this is mad. What was I know they're having me around their house, so I feel like, I earned the right. I saw a bit of a lifestyle that I could potentially have, and probably did adapt aspects of my behavior so that I could potentially try and do that, but yeah, I think going back to what I kind of touched upon a little bit is how whiteness itself is, working classness is a white on white issue. For me, I like to think it's a white supremacist issue. It's violence against other white people. Working classness is actually about the white elitist kind of like literally siphoning everything from the bottom and using and abusing and exploiting the working class. And I personally don't have a direct lineage to that, but I do respect that. So it's interesting because white supremacy can be used on white people, but this is obviously very convoluted, so I won't try and say too many things that are going to get me in trouble, or people are going to be like, that's wrong. I guess to kind of round up what my sharing is, I wanted to kind of understand how we can probably, start to, as well as dismantling racism, as we're all trying to do in whatever ways, how can we start to dismantle classism? I don't know. I'm not expecting us to leave with that answer, but that's kind of why I've started this conversation. And we can come together in our struggles. There's a lot more differences. There's a lot more differences in terms of the way that we're potentially treated. But there's similar barriers, and I'm hoping people can share that with me. So I'll probably leave it at that. But I've got some other bits I could kind of share. Has anyone got anything immediately that you want to say on what I've just been talking about? Christina.
So like I said, my background is, I come from Newcastle. My mum is from, and this is a thing as well, because for our parents, this idea of class, for us, is becoming less relevant over time, or that's my perception of it. Obviously, as a classical music student, there's pockets where you're seeing that there's still there's areas that seem to be more accessible to people of different classes. But for me, especially, so I was raised more in my dad's background than my mum's, but my mum was middle class, and her relationship with my dad meant that her family rejected her because he was of a different class than she was. My dad was a miner and was very strongly adhered to pride values within his class. But my mum recognised that in order, and my dad as well, recognised that in order for us to get ahead, to be university educated, that kind of thing, as I was, there are things that you need to do to, as a white person, because obviously I don't know the experience of black people, as a white person, I had to speak better than the people who lived where I lived. I had to get better grades, you have to take part in different things to defy your roots, and like in that sense. And so you push really hard and you have to work really hard to escape being put into a certain bracket of working classness because of where you're from in terms of demographic and in terms of the area that you live in. And obviously it's I understand and accept that the struggles that affect people of any non-white race are separate from ours, but it for me it's like I see the way that working class white people have been turned against people of color through that narrative that you address, where it's like the resource stealing, which is a fallacy. It's not a thing that happens, but they pit us against each other in the same way that they pit working class white people against each other. And in order to get people, say, from my area who would now fall into a very sadly racist bracket, it's because that narrative has been sold to them. And I understand that because I had to fight that narrative myself, but because of education and my friendship groups and moving around a lot more, I didn't end up with the mindset of blaming other people for the things that I don't have. But that's because I managed to get out of that and maybe like better myself. So in terms of class identity, I would still want to identify with being proudly working class because I feel like there's so much that's good about that. There's a lot of good values. There's so much hardworkingness, but it's sad for me that working class whiteness is now associated and kind of for good reason with the racist narrative, and it is this idea that we have so little, so we're forced to fight against each other. The example that I've thought about was when you try to explain white privilege to white working class people who don't have anything. The word privilege, I think, is very triggering for people who don't have a lot of stuff. So even though all the points that are being made are legitimate, I sometimes feel like white people switch off as soon as you try to tell them that they're privileged because they don't feel that way. And in certain ways, I even feel like it's difficult to talk to other white people, say from where I'm from, who I have friends from school who through Facebook and things like that are now expressing views I would never have expected them to express. But it's quite difficult to have conversations with those people and try and explain to them that we're on the same side and the resources that are being taken from us have been taken from us by people in power who already have far too much, rather than people who have the same as you. It's sort of just the establishment of the term of like white working class. It's like it is a subset of people, but now if there's pride in that because there's anger with another group, that shouldn't be what it represents. It should be a source of pride, but because of I don't know, industries, trades, like it's cool to be proud of being working class, but the second you even add white working class to that, it's difficult. It's really difficult to navigate because, like you said, Yemi, like you considering yourself as like if I had to put myself in there, and that's what the system makes you do is slot yourself in, and when almost the system itself is a problem, but I recognize I'm a part of it. I guess that's all I have to say about it.
That's great. Yeah, Josie, we'll come to you next. I just wrote a couple of things on what Christina said, but I just found this like really interesting comparison about when you talk about speaking better and getting better grades. These are exactly the same things that my parents told me that I had to do. As a black girl, you've got to be better behaved. Like don't like make sure that you get good grades because you will have to work just as hard. So that is such an interesting. I wonder if that kind of parental advice thing could come into it a bit more, and people understanding that if there are people from Black, Asian or other ethnic backgrounds being told that same thing that white working class people are being told because of their class. So yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting similarity, I guess, that I'd experienced myself.
Thank you. Yeah, just off the back of that, actually, I can totally relate to that work ethic thing, which I think is really capitalist, but it's basically like, if you don't work really hard, you won't be able to afford to live. But yeah, I was just listening to that, and basically like the thing that I brought today that I wanted to talk about is this sort of idea of the white working class, and actually how quite not dangerous, but like negative I think that could be for how we basically perceive the working class, because actually quite a high percentage of the working class in the UK now is people of colour. So I think when people think of like white working class, they almost think of like a white man in a flat cap that's been like working down the mines, when actually that's not an accurate representation of what working class is anymore. And that's why I think it was interesting learning that there's like the way that class is defined has also changed now. It's basically like, but yeah, by what sort of job role that you do. And there's all that intersectionality as well that I really want to learn about with race and class. So yeah, I guess that's just another, yeah,
no, well, that was really good, honestly, because yeah, exactly, like the fact that the idea of white working classness is actually potentially outdated now.
Yeah.
I guess that's a question of terminology. I want to go back to what Christina said about the word privilege, you know, just being triggering and shutting people off. And I do think there's a lot to be said about knowing your audience, be able to have conversations with people on a way that they're going to understand it. So it means you have to translate yourself in a way that you think isn't going to offend. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. I think actually we must do that. So yeah, I think terminology and the kind of outdated terms, that's an interesting point. I don't know, I might come back to that in a bit, but does anyone have anything else they wanted to kind of share of what's just been said? Lily?
This is just a very small point, but I think it's really interesting the fact that so the white working classes so often seem to turn on black communities and to be racist, but because they're the immigrants and they're the rural, but they never seem to turn on immigrants who are white. So so my dad's German and he's totally an immigrant, and he's never had to face any kind of racist behaviour at his work or anything like that, because he speaks with a very thick German accent, and you know, it's obviously not British, but he's never faced that kind of discrimination, maybe because he's a man or maybe because he's white, probably both. But I think it's very interesting the fact that that difference between, I don't know if it's like a class thing or if it's a race thing or if it's a mixture of both. I don't know in what kind of levels, but how we make those distinctions between what we view and stereotype as an immigrant or a migrant, and the people who are that but don't seem to fall into that category in a lot of people's eyes.
Well, this is no, carry on. Sorry.
No, I'm done.
This is exactly why. This is where the strangeness comes to racism and classism. Basically, obviously, I would imagine if we had anyone in here who was from a maybe Polish working class background, they might have something different to say about that. However, I do believe that there is that, you know, you can hide behind your veil, you can change your accent, and you can not experience racism. However, you know, I do believe that there are people who probably have, once they kind of tell people where they're from, but to think that you have to hide a part, do you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't be able to tell that as a way of avoiding something that exists for the people. That just shows the injustice of it all, I guess. It's crazy, but Joel, yeah, please.
I think it's just like kind of crazy how racism is kind of made a working class and perhaps a white working class issue. I think that's quite interesting when actually a lot of the racism that we're seeing is structural, and it kind of feels as though it's kind of smoke and mirrors, isn't it? It's kind of this duality of, well, what is accepted of being even white. So I think that's a really interesting point to kind of discuss.
Yeah, so like the idea, well, basically, like we're talking about white working classes having racism. It's actually it's the middle class and the upper middle classes that are more investing in the structural and institutional racism. So they're the ones who are the most racist. Yeah, it's it's very unfair, you know, it's all very unfair, and there's not much that we can kind of do to change what's happened so far, but what we can do is hopefully gather some or gain some phrases or just ways of speaking about things or ways of thinking about things that will hopefully, the next time you come across someone of a different background or class, I don't know, that you can ask a question and feel that there is something there between you that you could actually, that could spark something positive. I don't know, I think it's very strange when you so like, I think a lot of people might feel that I was middle class. There was times when people would assume that, and then I'd be like, oh gosh, no, I grew up in an estate. God, like, you know, I just had to adapt. But I do think one thing I will admit is that I have let go of some of my racial identity to do that. So I don't know if anyone else feels that, like, in any way, this is actually quite an interesting point, same kind of thing, but as a white person of middle class, do you feel like you have an identity? This is what I think there's a problem here about white people seeming not to think that they have any heritage or identity, or the only heritage or identity they're given is flags, the army. And so does anyone have any kind of things they would say or share as what is your white heritage? What do you think it is? Josie and Christina and Lily.
I think for me, like, folk music and Morris dancing. Like, I know, right? Which also just makes me think, wow, that's not heritage. But yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, sort of folk music. But then I don't know, learning about music, like, a lot of that seems to stem back to Black people and people of colour that we've sort of taken on. So I don't know, like, again, without doing my research, and also there was a lot of racism in the folk music scene. I can't remember which, yeah, some form of, like, dancing, but yeah, so.
Really, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'll find out. I'm trying to remember what it's called.
That's all right. I mean, I think I can probably have a little Google myself.
Yeah.
I understand how that came about. So I think Christina was next.
Yeah, so I guess in that sense, my story is a bit interesting because I don't know who my dad is, but the dad that raised me was a white working class man from Newcastle, and just my background being as it is, like, we moved around a lot because my dad worked in industries where you had to move to do that, you know, construction and doing mining, all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's interesting in terms of when I was first learning, you know, trying to learn more in this movement. A thing that I did question in myself was, do I, for example, in terms of music and stuff, and there's so much richness that comes from non-white cultures that we have the privilege of enjoying because Britain is so multicultural. But then for me, I was almost like, what, is there a part of me that, like, fetishizes that, you know, like, it's like, oh, in the same way that the Kardashians do, for example, you know, where it's just like you feel like you have a right to something, or you're taking something without giving its culture of origin the proper dues. And then when I thought about it, I was like, I don't, because I do feel like my experiences with friends that I have that are non-white are their sharing of cultures. And even though because I don't have anything that extends beyond my immediate family, which is quite unusual, I guess a lot of people have further back heritage. But then for me, I'm fascinated by any and all cultures and any and all people's backgrounds and families, your relationship with your mums. I don't know, I love all of it. But it's interesting that, so I kind of feel like a little bit of an outsider in terms of that would never be a way that I would define a comparison with another person, because it's not my personal experience to have a point of comparison. So in a certain way, in understanding everybody's point of view in this, it's like, oh, I'm at a loss to sort of understand how you could feel so strongly that you belong to one thing enough to not feel comfortable with another, because for me it's always been about trying to be more part of something, trying to fit in, trying to learn, and trying to share experiences with people. So I think it's the best way to go forward in any dialogue. For me, you know, that's probably more talking to white people about what the differences are than black people, or any person of color, because they're already aware of it. But there's a lot to go at in terms of solidarity with other white people about where they feel they have been wronged by a system, but where that's not the fault of another culture or another heritage. It's an individual and personal way you can find that, and you can have rich experiences that take from any culture, as long as you're sharing in that rather than taking from it or being threatened by it, so excluding it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, this is the thing. It's like you want to share things. You want to have pride. People want pride in things. That's essentially what this kind of comes down to a lot of the time. But integration, I think you'd like to think there could be more to champion integration as something to be proud of. And maybe modern whiteness is being inherently multicultural because of the nature of our economy and society. I don't really know. I can't really say that for anyone. Just kind of off the back of what you just said. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christina. Lily, what are you going to say?
This is more just a general thing, but I think so. I think a lot of the problem with white culture is that so much of it, well, most of it is just taken from other cultures. And I think something that a lot of white people have kind of inside themselves is like this sense of guilt, and they actually don't have they don't feel like they have any of their own culture to be proud of.
Yeah.
And so I think very often that can lead to them like latching on to other people's struggles. And so I think especially something that happens a lot is people like try to be like more working class, or try to adopt like some of those behaviors or some of those things, so that they have a struggle and they have an identity.
Which is crazy.
Yeah,
it's so common. Carry on. Sorry.
And like appropriating that stuff, so that they feel like they because everyone wants to feel like they've had it hard and like they've overcome something, and obviously everyone does have their own stuff to overcome, but I think I really liked what Christina was saying about you should be proud in your ability to share and not take. And I think that's something that needs to be worked on a lot, is like everyone has to find their own identity. That's not necessarily something that just comes from what family you were born into or what race you were born into, and I think that's something that obviously we're all working towards, is where that doesn't matter. And it is just about it's about doing the work now to like end the structural racism and classism and sexism, until we can be a point where it is literally just about each individual person. And I think while these are still like such major structural issues, I think white people struggle to like stay in their lane, because they feel like they don't have
a lane.
Exactly.
This is how white supremacy has messed us all up, really. White supremacy has really messed that up. Thank you. That was a really good point. I was going to ask if anyone maybe start to wrap it up, if we've not got too much more to share, but has anyone experienced classism? Do they believe, and in what ways? Has anyone got any kind of Joe?
So I guess it was going to Manchester University as a working class boy was quite intimidating, because like most of your cohort were from kind of middle class backgrounds and stuff like that. So definitely had experiences where I felt like I was being judged in the way I spoke. Experiences where you could tell that people weren't taking me seriously, and questioning your intelligence and things like this based on class. So I guess there is an internal struggle about that, and I think it's something that's kind of almost inbred to you as a working class person. Like I didn't see it so much as like being motivated to move between class, as much as it was you stick in your class because this is class you're born with. You will drink brown ale and you will work down a pit. But then I guess over the 90s and stuff, there was a big effort in politics and society really to say that all these isms were wasms. That's like something that was quoted by Tony Blair, and that kind of took that away. And I think it has left a lot of people lost for an identity, which I believe is a fertile ground for things like racism and white supremacy. because people are scrambling around for something to hang on to. So whoever can get that narrative out to them and talk about their troubles and link them to kind of tangible things that are believable, they're the ones that are kind of dictating how our society interacts.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, literally lost identity. That's what it is. It's so strange. Thank you, Joel. Josie.
Yeah, just a little bit on that. I'm just thinking of my own experience now, and I think I can relate a lot more to this as when I was growing up rather than now, because obviously, I mean, when I turned 30, I think I finally actually just feel like I found my identity, kind of. But that's all. It's been a lifelong. Yeah, it's been a lifelong weird thing for me. I think I definitely had like depression and stuff when I was a teenager and a kid. But that whole working, I've always found work, like just class, such a weird thing that I can't connect to, because basically my dad was a cleaner but my mum went to university, had a good job, but then she had a mental breakdown, so couldn't work anymore. So we were then on benefit. So, but she was like really intelligent. It would do like yoga or listen to classical music, which I guess like middle class activities. This is like, how do you define this? Like, this is what I find so interesting about it. And I'd find myself at school like not really connecting to anything, and I actually hated school. And I look back at it, like didn't have loads of friends, was just sort of floating around really. And I think maybe that, like not being able to define my identity and not being able to connect with anything, like just not really having any money, so didn't really feel like I could connect with like more middle class children, but then not being like really working class and like, I don't know, smoking weed and stuff. Like I just sort of was in the middle somewhere. And I found it quite difficult actually. Like, so yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's this whole like shifting, moving, fluid class fluidity, dare I?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what does it all mean? But
I think Joel's right. Like, you know, we were like, oh, we're not supposed to be anything. Everything's supposed to be great, but none of us have as much opportunity as we should. It doesn't matter if it's what race you are, but or what class. Well, I suppose like if you are in the top two, but there's pressure in the middle as well. Like you say, like your mum going through that experience of like pressure in her job and all that. Like there's just pressure on all of us in society, and being forced to choose something based on really intangible stuff. So we end up doing it based on tangible things that they can present to us through the media.
Well, yeah, and like no, definitely, and there's this thing of I don't know, identity as kind of can be cultural, and I am actually doing a whole thing tomorrow on like aesthetics and the big A word and, you know, adoption of culture, so I won't go too much into that today. But I think one thing I noticed growing up is in the last 10 years, obviously the natural hair movement and things like being actually African. I don't think I would have worn a head wrap 10 years ago when I was 20 years old, because I didn't want to be seen as African. However, I mean, the skin was a pretty big giveaway, you know, but like, you know, I did things like that. So it's interesting to think whether anyone feels like they, I guess, when it comes to like identity and looking a certain way or whatever, that helps you to associate with a different class. I don't know. Yeah, sorry, a little bit of a rant there. I saw Joel's hand kind of.
I mean, yeah, to answer that question, you know, I love wearing my chef whites, and like I love the whole kind of idea about being working class. There's some things that are kind of nice and noble and kind of romanticized about it that are stuck in my head, you know, and that's a true fact. But it is that kind of always that kind of struggle between I too, just linking some of the other experiences there, I've taken on different aspects of being middle class. From, you know, different people I've been friends with, relationships, etc. And it is, I can completely like relate to that kind of like, you know, what you were talking about earlier about being in the migrant class, not quite knowing that you fit in, and like what are my values, you know, like, and feeling that kind of attack on yourself, and like actually questioning yourself and frustrating yourself. And the struggle is real with things like that. I think with racism and classism, I think that's what they actually share. And that's probably where like a really useful dialogue can actually come in to build some kind of like solidarity between these groups.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Basically, like, what we do share is this kind of identity crisis issue. Because I come here and I'm trying to be one person, I look like another, I'm trying to be a mixture, I want to be it all, and again, yeah, with classes like, who am I white, what does that mean? And where there seems to be I'm saying this from an outside point of view, there seems to be a more set of values for your middle class or upper middle class. There is, there's definite things that you are entitled to and things like that, but if you're not quite there, then you're just currently sitting in the middle, and it's all very confusing. But I think we get older and we get better at it. We get better at asserting it, and things change. I'm very proud to be Black, British, and African. There are times I wasn't, but at the same time, I was very proud to see how aspects of like African culture and stuff have come into play a lot more in the last 10 years, club nights and music and the way that's all kind of crossed, which is amazing. It's the one thing we should really be proud of. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else had anything else they kind of wanted to share, any last hot takes on like on the topic or the issue, or
yes, I think mostly the thing that is the same between us and the barrier that is kept there is economic, right? Like if we were, it's the disadvantage. Like if everybody, we all want to have enough resources to be comfortable, and the racist element from the working class background seems to me through the news to be coming very strongly from those people really believing through what they've been told that the reason they don't have the resources that they need to be happy is the fault of people who don't look the same as them or people who are from a different place, which is not the case. It's the fact that economically speaking, as we all know, so much of everything is owned by the people that already have loads of it. So, and that as well, it's like the perpetuation of even the idea of the class system. Which I had European friends that I lived with who were like, it's really weird here that you guys still have that.
yeah, right.
It's obviously because it serves the powers that be to keep us in these brackets of to try and get me to foster and granted there's elements of that can be great, like you say, Joel, like the idea of having a trade, the idea that certain jobs are proudly working class, and in that sense it's like maybe if there was a way to redefine that, it's like you'd be proud to be in a role that serves people rather than in a role that's like it's not like a people facing grassroots thing. There is so much pride to be had in that. But it's hard for people to have pride in something when even though they're working really hard, they don't have the things that they need. But what's most important is to get it across to those people that is not the fault of people who are from somewhere else. It's not the fault of people that don't look like you. It's the fault of the people who are stopping you from getting there. And I think that's the reason that they keep these things in place, like the idea that you have to speak well, the idea that you have to change your name on your CV so people don't think you're a different color. Like that's crazy that we're all waking up to the fact that these are all constructs that keep us feeling away because they're trying to stop us from bettering ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, it's like there's a glass ceiling, so to speak, for
Yeah, it's like a glass box, man, everywhere, like sideways, up, down.
And the thing is, we don't want it all. We don't want it all. We just want less of a neggy narrative. It's just like pretty neggy narrative all the time, isn't it? It's just like, oh gosh, that's so exhausting. Thank you for doing that. Josie and then Lily.
Thank you. My mind's gone blank. Oh yeah, so yeah, I think that's it. There's a lot of fear, isn't there? I think that's where this is all coming from, especially with the working class, and they've had this fear instilled into them about the resources and everything. But maybe like going back to what you were saying at the beginning, Yemi, which is like this is a thing, like if you are working class, as like I've experienced, like you might have a harder journey, but you can change your class, whereas you can't change your race. And there's always, well, hopefully not always, but like there's currently so many issues with that. And I think maybe like educating the working class, like gently, like all of this information can be shared so gently in a way that's not like sort of blaming anyone, but like realizing, yeah, like white working class people's struggles at the same time is also like trying to help them understand that, yeah, they don't need to be scared.
There'll be more of us together, you know. There would be more of us if we joined forces. But it's not that straightforward. No, fair enough. Thank you, Josie. Lily, what were you going to say?
I was just going to bring up the point about the British like state school, private school thing, and I think so much of classism in the UK is, and racism actually, I think is like perpetuated by this system, because it just, I mean, I was state schooled and then I went into music, and like it's such a minority, which is ridiculous. I presume everyone here is, I mean, again, I presume that everyone is state schooled, but I had always kind of grown up in an area where, you know, everyone that I knew was state schooled. That was just like the normal thing. And then all of a sudden you're in this very elitist industry where everyone is private schooled. And
interesting.
And I think and everyone in the government is private schooled, like the majority. And I think there's such a lack of understanding because of of people being separated from such a young age, and like upper middle class people just don't ever really chat to and get to know a working class person, or the other way around. And because from the age of 4, they've been in completely separate education systems and they've been living in completely different worlds. So and isn't that, and yeah, I just think that's one of the things that's so toxic, because it stops people talking to each other, and stops people understanding each other. And I think that's one of the things. I mean, you said a little bit at the beginning about how we could begin to like dismantle classism, and I think that's one of the things that could really be changed.
The school system, absolutely. The school system has a lot to answer for, really, in terms of the development of how we all become people. And I think there's something really enriching about, imagine like the idea of having a mixed identity, like having friends from all different backgrounds, heritage-wise as well as class-wise, and being able to almost be that kind of driving force of intersectionality, and being like, oh, well, I know this upper class person and this thing, but maybe there's a way that, not that it's on anyone's duty, it shouldn't be like a job or something that you seek to do on purpose to be that person. But I think the more hybrid identities and mixed backgrounds we all do, the more we become, we've all got a finger in one of the pies somewhere, do you know what I mean? And it's got to come together in some way, shape or form eventually. I mean, I like to think so, I'd like to hope so, otherwise, it's pretty grim, pretty bleak outlook. So I'd like to hope that, the more that we continue to appreciate intersections, we all feel empowered by having knowledge of other people, and not excluded. But yeah, I don't know, have you got any other sharing? Yeah, please do.
I would just say I do agree with that, because I think since I moved to Manchester, my sort of friendship group opened up, although I will say, like, I am sad that I don't have many like friends of colour, which is something again that I really want to try and change. But I guess like it's kind of just what happens sometimes. Like, but I have been like fortunate enough to like make friends with people of different backgrounds, and it definitely gives you a different perspective. Even like people that have come from wealthier backgrounds who actually have really bad mental health problems because like they have awful relationships with their families, and like I can totally find compassion for them. Like, this is the thing, I think it's like realizing that you can find compassion for people without completely abandoning your own experiences. Like, it's not a competition about,
well, they make it a competition, but it's
I've got a book recommendation as well, if that's all right.
Yeah, please do.
I'm only 4 chapters into it, but it's a Carla's Natives.
Okay, so everyone has told me to read that, and I think it's
it's like I'm like just listening to a lot of things, especially like stuff that you've been sharing, Yemi. Like has talked a lot about that, and I just think it's such amazing insight. So yeah, I think everyone should definitely read that.
Brilliant. This is the thing. Okay, so like just on the topic of books are great, but books help you self-educate. But we need alternative resources because reading isn't great for everyone. It's difficult, isn't it? We obviously now we have social media, we have videos and pictures and images, and hopefully people aren't learning just off memes. But that is a way to reach a certain audience. I guess audiobooks exist. I feel like I don't know. I think there could be a lot more ways that we can like use books, but also I don't know, educate in other ways. But Christina.
In that regard, actually, I started listening to, as I knew this was coming up, the podcast by the lady that wrote Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
And she interviews a Carla in it as well, which is what made me think of it. And that, like you say, because sometimes I've been reading a lot as well, but it's exhausting getting all of your information from one medium. I think, it's also really important to, if you're just trying to encourage, say, other people that you want to talk to, again, not everyone's going to want to read things, and just seeing information presented in different ways with snippets from Dick. I found it really interesting that she basically explores the subject with people from all class backgrounds and and lots of different racial backgrounds, and it did actually present a really sort of balanced view of things, and it wasn't antagonistic, and I was really impressed with it in terms of being quite similar to this.
Interesting.
I'll send you the name of it if you would like to share it.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. JC.
Yeah, just a quick one. I've actually listened to the audiobook of the Carla one because I struggled to read these days. I used to love it when I was a kid. But I really like it because he's actually narrated it as well. So when he's talking about his experiences, I felt more connected to it because I feel like he's telling me like his story almost. So
No, that's great, and that actually really kind of brings me back to why this exists. So this is obviously going to be put online. The reason it started, I thought about this format was mainly just because I've seen how many horrible online public disputes been happening, and it's just like, this is not constructive. It's actually people just putting out their anger online, and I get it, and it has to happen, but it's not constructive. Private conversations, and actually I'd like to hope that people who watch these conversations back when I do put them out, I don't know, I just hope it is a resource, people's experience is a resource, it should be, and like being able to watch talks, I'm hoping that that's the effect in terms of it helping, and if it continues, that people still want to do it, I want to continue to do it as much as possible. So I guess that probably wraps us up, unless anyone's got anything else to say. Oh, well, thank you guys. Even though it was a smaller session, we still managed to fill the time, which is just amazing, because obviously these things they're just huge, isn't it? You can go one way or the other. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that today. And I'll update everyone in terms of when it's going to come out. And make sure you're all happy with it and stuff. And but I think that's it for now. I have offered every session a part 2 potentially. But I'll do that once they've all come out, because I guess everyone's going to be quite eager to see what the response is, I'm expecting there's going to be some negative comments. Of course, people are going to be like, oh, that. But the idea of it being a personal experience means that someone can't ever tell you that your life experience is not true. That is just not, whether you're super rich and I'm telling you that, which I would never do, I'd tell you that you've had the best life ever, that you're telling us that you've had a struggle, and I'm like, no, I can't turn around and say that, personal experience is essentially our education, that's our social education. So thank you for sharing all your stories, and I'll hopefully speak to you all soon. Bye.
I'm so glad I'm feeding I'm so glad I'm feeding I'm so glad I'm